In this episode of Museums Without Borders, we partner with the Peabody Essex Museum. Join us in this conversation between a painting by Ram Kumar and a photograph by Jyoti Bhatt that explores questions of modernity, post-colonial identity, and interpretations of artwork titles. Jyoti Bhatt, the man behind this image, is a celebrated Indian artist who has made significant contributions to photography, painting, and printmaking. Bhatt was born in 1934 in Gujarat and grew up in a creative environment. He studied painting at the Faculty of Fine Arts at MSU Baroda in 1950, taking to photography towards the later half of the 1960s. Bhatt was part of the early generation of post-independence Indian modernists like Ram Kumar. His journey of documenting the living traditions of rural India began with a project commissioned by the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in Mumbai, which took him to rural parts of Gujarat. At this time, India had recently gained independence from the British, and many institutions were grappling with questions of how to draw on the best of international modernism while preserving what was essentially Indian. And this is something that we see reflected in Bhatt's work too.
On the other hand, Ram Kumar feels quite different. When we think of Ram Kumar, we tend to think of his more abstract paintings. But the two works we have here at the Peabody Essex Museum, Unemployed Graduates and Burden, are from the 1950s, and so they reflect his earlier interests in figuration over abstraction. While Jyoti Bhatt seems to balance modernity and indigeneity, Ram Kumar is one of those artists who traveled outside of India and found inspiration elsewhere. He studied painting in France under the mentorship of André Lotz and Fernand Léger, so he takes inspiration from Western styles, such as abstraction, but retains a certain kind of Indian sensibility. Yet despite these differences, both Ram Kumar and Jyoti Bhatt have an interest in this emotional or very human experience. Even in one of Ram Kumar's landscapes, you can feel this tension and emotional turbulence, but it's delivered in a very quiet way.
This image, titled Harijun Girls from Kutch, was photographed in 1979. This was also a time when Bhatt was at his most experimental, frequently drawing inspiration from traditional forms and motifs in his work. Despite exposure to Western norms of artistic education, Jyoti Bhatt's work shows a balance of modernity with indigeneity. One of Bhatt's most popular images, it shows three young girls, possibly from the Meghwal community of the Bunny grasslands. Standing against a wall, wearing traditional clothing, the girls are looking away from the camera. There's a sense of awkwardness, or it perhaps even reflects the impatience of young children as their attention seems to be elsewhere. Unlike the documentary title of the image, reminiscent of colonial methods of ethnographic documentation, the lack of eye contact between the subjects and photographer lends a sense of authenticity to the image.
Unemployed Graduates was painted in 1956 and features these four men, a number of them dressed in suits, which tells us that they've attained a certain level of education. We can immediately tell that they lead a very different lifestyle than the three girls featured in Jyoti Bhatt's photograph. Ram Kumar is more interested in the urban populations, the challenges of living in a city. And if we think about the social context during which it was painted, India was still in a very challenging position. While there's freedom from British rule, and there's a dream of a secular nation, there's a lack of opportunities accompanied by communal tensions. And Unemployed Graduates really embodies this struggle.
The use of the word Harijun is a strong reminder of the caste discrimination re-elevated by colonial intervention in the 1930s. It's a reminder of political ignorance and the unsuccessful efforts to banish the use of the term, often misused by individuals from upper castes. It's also interesting to think about the title of these two works and the artist's intention. Ram Kumar's title, Unemployed Graduates, feels more genuine and reflective of the sentiment that he wanted to capture in the painting. On the other hand, Jyoti Bhatt's title, Harijun Girls from Kutch, is more reflective of the times.
What immediately caught my attention with both works are the way the eyes have been captured. The figures in Unemployed Graduates have these distinctly and sharply painted eyes. They look almost wet with tears, slightly anxious. The title also signals stress, a sense that they're carrying this burden on their shoulders, which helps you interpret the meaning behind the work. To me, it's almost like a poetic hook. But with the photograph, it's up to the viewer to interpret their expressions, and the title is more clinical. It's also interesting how all three girls do not look directly at the viewer. If they were just looking straight at the camera, it would have been reminiscent of the People of India series from the 19th century. But since they're looking away, they're not objectified in quite the same way. And so the photograph gives this impression that these girls have their own lives and their own agendas. There's also a sense of quietness that runs through both works. There's no cacophony or action, what you might see in a Hussein painting, for example.
While Ram Kumar addresses the throes of urban life in post-colonial India, Bhatt's image focuses on rural India. Their titles silently but strongly opening channels of inquiry. Both works also prod viewers to delve deeper when looking into an artwork. Beyond beauty and aesthetics, art also allows for the contemplation and reassessment of larger societal issues, some of which we continue to grapple with even today.